my name is Alice. I am from the UK government. I work in the Government Digital Service, which is a team that was set up about 2 years ago to rebuild digital public services for the UK. Our job is to transform government, and our aim is to make services so good that people prefer to use them. So the first thing we did was we built gov.uk. That's the website that I'm the front-end dev on, and that is the best place in the UK to find government services and information. We've got just so much information on there now. Things like when is the next UK bank holiday? That's a really popular page, particularly when bank holidays are approaching. What is the UK Foreign Office's advice for travelling anywhere in the world? And stuff that's a bit more weird, like what is goat plague and how do I spot and report that disease? We have 8 million visitors every week. We're home to over 200 departments and organisations, and we are saving the UK government more than £62 million a year just by cutting out contracts with big IT and bringing that expertise around building websites back in-house. We're also transforming government services, so we've taken the 25 most popular services that people have with the UK government, and we are transforming them one by one, redesigning them to meet the needs of users. So services are things like register to vote. So in the UK, prior to us launching register to vote, the way that you registered was you would get a card would be delivered to each household, and it would fall to the self-nominated head of household to fill in that card about everyone else who was eligible to vote in the UK. What we did was we decided that wasn't really very fair, because if you had a slightly incompetent head of household, then your whole household would not be able to vote. Or if maybe your head of household thought you shouldn't be voting, then you also wouldn't be able to. And so we've changed it. We've got individual electoral registration now, which is a much more democratic way to allow people to vote, and that has 45 million users ready to register to vote for the upcoming election, which will happen in May of next year. The next service I'm going to talk about is carers allowance. That is a service that is money that you are eligible for if you spend more than 35 hours a week caring for someone, a loved one generally. So what happens is your partner or your child or someone requires round-the-clock care, and you are giving them that care, so you're not working, so you are qualified for what is known as carers allowance. This has 60,000 claims and 89% user satisfaction, which is enormously high, particularly when you think about the fact that nobody wants to be claiming carers allowance. It's quite an unpleasant, sad situation to be in. So 89% is huge for us, and we're so proud of that. To do all of these things, we're working with digital teams and departments all over the country, and we are doing this in the same sort of standard way. So we're working in the open. That means that we blog a lot about all of our work, and we also, all of our code is public by default with GitHub. So there has to be a sort of security reason for it not to go onto GitHub. In that case, it goes onto our private GitHub. We also work in an agile way, and we have multidisciplinary teams. So all teams have front-end developers, back-end developers, designers. We also will have a user researcher in every team, and then people that sort of facilitate that team working well together, delivery managers and product owners and that sort of thing. At GDS, we're relentlessly focused on user needs. Everybody is given stickers that say what is the user need, and so whenever we're building anything new, everyone is just always asking, why are we doing this? What is the user need? Are we doing this because government thinks we should be doing this because it's always done it, or are we doing it because actually citizens need these services? As a result of that focus, we do an enormous amount of user research at GDS. It happens throughout the entire, all of the life cycle of the products. There's a user researcher in every team, and all members of teams are encouraged to go to user research sessions at least 1 month for the product that they're working on. Findings from user research are really important to us. They help us find out things like gaps in our understanding about the product or service we're building, but they also help us prioritize features, which means that we can throw away features or put them on the back burner so that we can launch it to meet deadlines. And it also stops us from implementing things that users don't actually want. Often there's a lot of pressure from departments to keep giving users features that they already have, but when you go into user research, you find that none of the users are actually using those features. And so when you rebuild the service, you can just get rid of those things, and it's really good. Findings from user research also often show up things that are just gaps in our understanding of the way people use computers, particularly people who are less technically confident. And those are my favourite findings. They're like so important to me because as a front-end developer, I want to make things that everyone can use, and the most challenging groups of users are people who aren't like people in this room, but people who are older or who have challenges with like motor skills, or maybe they're using screen readers, or those are the people that I, as a front-end dev, are like really excited to be helping. This isn't like a guilt trip for you guys. I used to work in the private sector. We didn't do any user research there, and I remember what that was like, because we were trying to ship code so quickly, and we would our way of improving the product would be seeing it in the field and then receiving feedback from whoever chose to give it to us and then improving based on that. That sort of simply isn't the way that we could work in the government, because we have so many needs to address. The UK government's website needs to serve everyone in the UK. The needs are those of an entire country interacting with its government. And so that's all kinds of people with all kinds of needs. We've got people who only use the web at work. They don't have any sort of Facebook or anything. There are people who only access the web on a public computer in a library. Maybe they're homeless. People who think the web and Facebook are actually the same thing. We get a lot of people like that. People for whom English is a second language, a third language, like an nth language. All of the language you use on GovUK has to be incredibly clear to serve those users. People whose reading comprehension is that of a 9-year-old. Again, that's why we keep all of our sentences very short, and all of our language has to be very clear for those people as well. People who use screen readers, people who are sat on their phones, only half paying attention to GovUK whilst also watching a conference talk. And all of these users are on GovUK because they need to be as well. That's the other thing about working on this website, is that no one really wants to go there. If you are going there, you're doing a task that's probably not that fun. Think about your interactions with your government. Nobody's like, yeah, I can take it, it's going to be amazing. Because generally you're going to do that because you have to be compliant, or in the best case, it's because you have to be compliant, maybe you need to pay your taxes. But in the worst case, it's because something bad has happened and you need the government to help you out with that. And so we do this user research because we want to make those interactions as frictionless as possible. We want people to spend as little time as possible on our website. They need to come to us, find the thing they need, and then they need to go. I say that in a really loving way, it's important. And sometimes we do user research and it just shows us that we're letting our users down, and it's because the people that are building GovUK are web people, and so we have all of these understandings of the way people use computers, and they're just not accurate in a lot of cases. And today I'm going to show you some user research, particularly with regard to select drop-down menus, which I had no idea were difficult for people to use until I joined GovUK and saw this research and was just like, wow, I'm a terrible person for not realising that. You wait, you'll feel terrible in a minute too. So user research participant 1, she is 30, she works in an office, she's smart and she's nice, she's just not so good with computers. The man that's with her is her boyfriend. The way we get technically unconfident users to come in to do research is we say, bring with you the person that helps you complete digital tasks at home. And so she has brought her boyfriend, and we've said to them, here's a task, we're just going to leave you to it, we're going to video it, we'll just see how you get on. I have a mission to show you these videos, but obviously don't share them further. They're going to be removed from the recording of this talk, if it goes up online. And also please be respectful, because obviously, I mean, as you can imagine, if you're being videoed doing something badly, like you don't want to think later that there's just a room full of strangers laughing at you about it. Because I mean, I don't find this funny, but some people do that nervous laughing thing, and that's not appropriate, just so we're clear. So anyway, here is, she has successfully completed that task, but actually having focus is not the same as it having been selected. And so she thinks she's done, so she moves on to the next one, and it immediately springs back to the value that was there before, which is really annoying for her. And you can tell by her voice at the end that she's getting quite frustrated by it. And you know, she's just telling us her date of birth, and she knows her date of birth, and it shouldn't really be that hard. This shouldn't be that much of a barrier for her to tell us when she was born. And her boyfriend is trying hard and patiently to help, but it's not really working. So research participant 2 is in his 70s. He's collecting carers allowance, which is that service I talked about earlier. People who use the carers allowance service have quite a severe set of challenges and present quite an interesting set of challenges for us because they are often older, and so they are often therefore less technically confident. They are often in a very stressful situation. The fact that they are at a computer trying to apply for carers allowance means that they are taking time away from the thing they want to be doing, which is caring for someone full time. And so that person is, you know, they're having to kind of distract themselves from that situation. That means they often have a very low attention span and not very much time to commit to this endeavour. And it's just, you know, these are the users that I feel most strongly about supporting because they're ones that have just been incredibly unlucky, and you can't, you know, I just feel terrible for them, and I just think this is my opportunity to help these people who have just been really unlucky. And so with carers allowance particularly, it's really important that that service is incredibly easy to use, because these people have such complex needs that we really just need to make it completely frictionless for them to just get the money that they are owed by the government. See the menu part coming up, and it definitely doesn't appear to occur to him that he could interact with it. But then when the researcher at the end says, if I was to ask you to type your date of birth into, oh, it's gone, that box there, would you be able to do it? And our participant is just able to do that because he just knows his date of birth, he's fine with using a keyboard. Oh no, it's just a video, and so he's very, I mean, comparatively, he's very quick. He's still slow at typing, but he doesn't have a problem with doing that. And that's the thing I'm trying to say here, is that people know their date of birth, and all of these select boxes are just getting in their way. And a lot of our users, we see a lot of research that is just people not being able to complete those forms because they can't use those boxes. But if you give them a text input, they're fine. So, just to give you some more things that happened, I mean, those are 2 videos, and I have like 10, which I just didn't want to show you all of. But things that we see, users are unable to close the select menu, so they picked it, and then they're just like, I don't know what happens next. Typing into the select, confusing focused items with selected items, that was what happened in the first video. And also, selects on tablets and mobiles are really difficult for users with that are very visually impaired, because although they can pinch zoom on web pages, when a select box comes up, they then can't pinch zoom those options, and so they're just like, I can't read any of that, and so they're completely stuck there as well. All of the users that we test with are pretty much okay with just typing their date of birth into text inputs. I think that the reason that we keep giving them selects is it's a pattern because we think that we need to force them into giving us their date of birth in a particular format, and we don't want to have to validate for like 20 different ways to express a date. At GDS we have a design principle which is do the hard work to make it simple. And this is what we ended up doing for dates of birth. This is from the IER service that I talked about. So what we've got there is just 3 boxes, and users, this tests really well with users. And it's because users of low technical confidence feel okay about putting things into boxes like that, because it's like very similar to filling in paper forms, and so they just move that mental model over and it's just typing. And how hard is this really, from a developer perspective? Again, it's not really that hard. So most scripting languages have a good date library. We use Ruby. Does Ruby's date.parse understand this to be a date of birth? Could this person be alive right now? Because one of the rules about voting is that you can't be dead. So that's good. Nailed the talk. Don't use selected date of birth. There's a bit more to this than that. What about other stuff? I mean, I think I've convinced you about data worth, I'm convinced. But there are some other cases where you might want to use a select box, and I'm just going to talk you through those as well now. But before we go into that, let's just look at some sort of prior art in this area. GDS are not the first people to discover that select boxes are bad. This is not new. So the drop-down menus used sparingly was an article written by Jacob Nielsen in November 2000, which is 14 years ago. I was trying to put like 14 years ago into context for me, trying to think about what's going on 14 years ago, came up with this. The Spice Girls were still having #1s when Nielsen wrote that. That's a really long time ago, and I was thinking, oh, you're giving this talk in Germany, so maybe make a sort of German context 14 years ago, and I came up with this. David Hasselhoff was still in Baywatch when Jacob Nielsen wrote that. That's a really long time ago. And well done me for finding a picture of David Hasselhoff with clothes on, by the way, because that was really probably the hardest thing I've ever done. Anyway, so yeah, so here we are. Just surrounded by select boxes. Hasselhoff isn't in Baywatch anymore. More recently, Luke Probluski has done some thinking about drop-downs, and he says drop-downs should be a UI of last resort. I really like this as a phrase, particularly the sort of last resort part. It means, you know, you've exhausted all other options and now you are left with this. So let's have a think about what are some alternatives to drop-downs. Luke's work mainly looks at sort of mobile interfaces, but I'm a web developer, so I've had to think about what you would do using standard web stuff. So first thing you need to ask yourself is, could I just be using a text box for this? We saw this with date of birth, and this is another like really classic pattern that is not really on the screen, but anyway, you can see that. So you've got title, and then you just got that really long list of titles. And what we find when people in government ask us to take a title from people is that they are actually not using that information. They store it and then they never look at it again. And so why are you forcing people into like a set list of things when you can just say, tell us what you want us to address you as if we ever contact you? It doesn't matter if you make up a title because we are only using it to talk to you, and you know you made up a title and we don't because we don't care. So that's one thing. And GDS UX is sort of everyone's responsibility, and so we, you know, I can go and say, let's not use a select for this, let's just use a box, and that's cool with everyone. It's another David Hasselhoff joke. For small numbers of discrete data, don't clap that, don't encourage me. You can just use select. You can just use radio buttons. If you've got the vertical space to display that, then you really don't need to use a select box for that. There are some kind of natty, not so new now, input types you might want to use as well. If you marked up the labels for price properly, then you could do that instead of using a select for continuous data, which doesn't even make sense because selects are like discrete values, so how are you going to put continuous data? I don't know. Anyway. So there are some times when none of those three brilliant solutions are going to work for you. And they are kind of difficult to think about, but I will try and give you an example. It's cases where you've got too many options to list consecutively, so it's just going to take up way too much vertical space on your page. And there are also cases where the user can't type in the thing they want, but if they saw the thing they wanted, they would know it. So they would know the right answer when they saw it, but they can't just type it off the top of their head. Difficult to think of like canonical examples for this. But I will talk to you a bit about so we built a custom widget basically because none of those solutions worked for us, and I'm going to tell you about that now. So in the UK we have this organisation called the Competitions and Markets Authority, and what they are is they investigate competitions between companies. I assume you have a similar thing in Germany because in July this year over here there was a competition scandal involving sausages. Where it turns out that you were price-fixing sausages and like 21 companies got fined a lot of money. I know this happened because I googled it before this talk, so don't be looking at me like, whoa, we would never do that. You totally did. Anyway, so that scandal would have been discovered and the fines would have been worked out by your equivalent of the Competition and Markets Authority, which is our organisation for like when people rig cake prices would be the UK equivalent. And so this list here is a list of things that a lawyer, it's a sort of a taxonomy of case outcomes that lawyers will be very familiar with. They would understand what all of that means. It's jargon to me, I have no idea. But if they saw that, they'd be like, oh yeah, I mean I want to find markets phase referral 1. Okay. But we didn't want to put that in a select box because we thought it was kind of messy. So we did this.
It looks a bit like a select box, but instead it's just an open closable list of checkboxes. Now before I talk about building your own custom widgets, I want to give you some advice, which you may take or not, but it is that custom widgets are really hard and you tend to do them badly, everyone does them badly, and so so we have things that are helpful though. Steve Faulkner has a really good checklist for custom components and web components, and it's just a really good baseline for accessibility standards. The list it should be keyboard focusable, it should be keyboard operable, can I operate it with a keyboard? It should have expected operation, so I should be able to infer how it's going to work based on other standard practices for web components. It should have a clear indication of focus. It should have a label that is exposed as an accessible name to accessibility APIs. It should have an appropriate role that is also exposed to accessibility APIs. And if it has any states of property, they also should be exposed in accessibility APIs. And we have a couple more requirements for building components for GovUK. I made these up actually. I mean, I think there are only two, and I think these are the two, but if you meet anyone else from GovUK, they might say something else. One is that it has to be functional without JavaScript. And the second is that it has to be functional in IE7+. Oh guys, you are about to feel so bad about yourselves when I tell you this next anecdote. Anyway, so progressive enhancement is really important on GovUK. Brad has this good quote, which is, progressive enhancement is about resilience as much as it is about inclusiveness. This is basically just, what if your connection drops out? You don't want to stop that person doing that really boring job that they have to do on our website just because they couldn't download the JavaScript. It's also about things like this. Last week we released a change that broke most of the JavaScript for the entire site for about 20 minutes on GovUK, and I don't think anyone actually noticed because we do progressive enhancement, and so our website was maybe a little less enhanced, but everything still worked and people were still able to use it and go about their boring government jobs. The reason we care about IE7 still is because we have, a small percentage of our users are on IE7, and that drops by about 1% a month currently. But that's still like 300,000 sessions, and also those users are kind of important to us. Often they're people who work in government departments, and so they are like stakeholders who will really tell us if the thing is not working for them. The other thing is that people who are still using Internet Explorer are not people who have simply not heard of Firefox yet. They are people who are trapped. And as a front-end developer, I feel very strongly that it is not their fault that they are stuck on IE7. So, to give you an example, we have my colleague went out to one of the government departments that we work with, and he got there and he was talking to them, and he realised that they download Firefox every morning to do their jobs. And that is because their computers are security wiped every night, and that removes any software that has been installed on there. So although they know about Firefox, they can't use it unless they download it every morning. Otherwise, they're stuck on IE7, and the internet and the web doesn't really work for them on IE7, and so they have to do this thing with Firefox. And I just feel really shit about that. We should probably be not making, it's not that hard to support IE7, guys. So, do the hard work to make it simple. And if all of this seems like quite a lot of effort to just make a component that's going to stop some people from using a select box, then I would implore you to step away from the front-end code, because accessibility, browser support, making things work when your JavaScript doesn't load, it happens. It's just all part and parcel of doing front-end. But it is fair to say that building custom widgets is always more work than you think it's going to be. So let's just talk quickly about the custom widget we built. This is the Competitions and Markets Authority webpage. So many competitions, investigations. And this is our widget. It's, it's a list of checkboxes. It feels quite good, it being a list of checkboxes, because under the hood, it is just some checkboxes, and that means that screen readers treat it like just a list of checkboxes. This whole open-y-closy bit is just a presentational layer that is not, it's a presentational concern rather than a semantic concern. It has tab index equals 0, which means it's that div is accessible to the keyboard, which means it opens properly. We have JavaScript event listeners to make it keyboard operable so people can infer how it works. It looks like this with no JavaScript. It's just always open basically when there's no JavaScript. And it looks like this in IE6. I know I said IE7 earlier, but I'm showing off right now. This widget's not perfect for everything. It's in our responsive site. If you are on a mobile view, it will go full width. And what that means is, if you're scrolling, you end up getting like trapped in little scrolling wells, basically, and that's kind of annoying for people. This is not a design we would have used if we didn't have stats like this, which is that for the Competitions and Markets Authority. Wow, it's changed my numbers to be Germany numbers. Maybe, I don't know. Does that mean? Maybe that doesn't. Does that mean 910%? No, 9.91%. Okay, brilliant. Wow. I'm so international. This is not my laptop. So the CMA has 91% visitors from a desktop, and that is because most people use the CMA website when they're doing their boring office jobs on the IE7. All of which is to say, if you're going to build a custom widget, design it with data, because what is going to happen otherwise is you're going to meet design challenges and forks in the road, and you want to really be optimizing for like the biggest group of users above a sort of baseline of performance basically for everyone. But there are certain cases where you're going to be able to make a choice that will undermine one group of users whilst massively improving the performance for another, and you really want to have the data to know which way to choose when you do that. So in summary, avoid selects. Think about the data that you're asking for. Sometimes you think you need a select when you really don't. Do the hard work to make it simple, and design with data. At GDS, we believe in sharing what we do will make it better, so you can read a lot about what we're doing over on our blog. We've got some design principles that are quite interesting, and all of our code is available on github.com/alphagov. Links to this for this particular talk are also available here. You can see that scrolly widget checkbox live on gov.uk/CMA cases, although it won't be optimized for your devices, because unless you're visiting on a desktop, you might use it, maybe that guy on the laptop there. Anyway, thank you.
So yeah. Always something to do with Black Panthers. No. Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for bringing us back to Hof. We waited a long time for that.
I want you all to know that joke was approved by the German that works in my office. So if any of you didn't like it, take it up with him, because I was like, I need to make these guys laugh, and he was like, use the half.
Yeah, it's always good to have approval German sitting in the office. So, would you like?
Yeah. Step into my office.
Yeah, we received a lot of questions, really.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we can only cover a few of them, so let's start right away. One of them was, which I think particularly interesting. Do you know the process of how the research participants are chosen?
The research what?
The participants.
No. Oh, yes. So, actually, I do. We have, in some cases, we use companies that we sort of contract that out to companies whose job is just finding user research participants. With services, we tend to find people who use those services, and so we have that information because we're transferring from one more paper-based service to a digital service, and we find people that way. Particularly things like when we're doing things for farmers, they have like really specific needs and also often very low technical confidence, and so it's really important that we speak to actual farmers who will be using the service. But we do a lot of general testing, which we just use as a sort of contracting company to find people.
Cool. And somebody asked, I think it was Ian who asked, if you also repeated the tests on mobile devices and not only on desktop devices.
Well, yes. I'm not sure I understand the question. I mean, we have a user research lab which people come in and do. You know, we say use what you would use, and so we do that. But also, like as a front-end developer, I test across devices. It's just a case of optimizing for what the user base is likely to be, and people just don't look at like nobody's hobby is competitions and markets authority investigations, so no one is looking at that on their phone, basically.
Okay, one last question. Do you know if also eye tracking was used when you did the tests with the participants?
In those research videos that I showed, we don't, and we don't have any eye tracking software in our user research lab, or maybe we do. We don't. It's very noisy, the user research with eye tracking, and what we find is quite common with what is, you know, well known in the industry, which is the sort of F pattern of people go like across the top and then they just go down and they miss everything in this space.
Okay, and then there seems to be a lot of interest in goat disease, so please tweet the link on how to spot it. Quite a few people seem to be very interested in. I don't know why.
Yeah, there are a lot of. I mean, goat plague is serious, but there are a lot of funny serious pages on WK. So it's like a fun game that we as developers play to find them. There's one about purple chickens, which is particularly good. I don't know. No.
Interesting. So then again, thank you for a great talk. Thank you, Alice.